Okay, let's talk about CODA. Up for Best Picture and like I think two other awards in this Oscar race or whatever. So CODA stands for Child of Deaf Adults, and in this movie, it's about a girl named Ruby. Her brother, mother, and father are all deaf. It's like a coming of age story, and it's one of those movies that as soon as the first lines of dialogue were spoken, I like knew what the whole movie was gonna be, and I was right. Because every single coming of age story seems to be exactly the same, and I have no idea why. It's like they think they have to follow this like cookie cutter outline or something. And it feels like there's like a South Park joke in one of the episodes when like they keep like cutting to these previews, and it's always like Rob Schneider, it's the stapler. And he doesn't realize that being a stapler isn't as easy as it's cracked up to be, or something like that. And that's basically what I feel most coming of age stories are. I mean, except the ones that are about absolutely nothing, like Hand of God was. It's a movie I thought I was going to forget about, but things keep reminding me of it. But every coming of age story is basically, Ruby is a child of deaf parents. And she's going to learn that being a child of deaf parents isn't all it's cracked up to be, or whatever. You know, it's like, it's the same damn thing. Like the one came out the other year, Lady Bird, and that one was actually pretty good. And this one actually wasn't bad either, but I'll get into that in a second. But it's just like they're so similar to each other. It's like a girl learning how to live life by herself, you know, how to become more independent and all that stuff. And it's like, though everyone's experience growing up is similar, I would say it's all always different too. And you know, I'd almost rather see like a coming of age story in like a different time period, or in a fantasy realm or something, or like in a zombie world. But like these ones, like these modern day coming of age bullshit, they're just always the same, and they're just boring. They bore me because they're always the same. Okay, let's go through the plot, I guess. Or at least as much of the plot as I can stand. So our whole family runs like a fishing boat, pretty much. One of the conflicts is that they're trying to get more for the fish they sell to this company that's basically undercutting them constantly. And it's been pissing them off along with every other fisherman, but no one does anything about it. And Ruby keeps trying to convince her family, like, they should, you know, step up and stuff. And her brother's doing the same thing, actually. But, like, because she's the only person who's not deaf in their family, she's basically been her interpreter for everyone else their whole life, because they only speak sign language. They can't even read lips that well. Or they can't, the mother and father can't read lips at all, actually. And the brother can only read lips sometimes. But because she's the only person who can hear in her family, and her mother and father are very self-centered people, she becomes the family scapegoat. And that's made clear at their first dinner scene, because she's like listening to music at the table, and mom's like, that's rude, don't listen to music at the table. And then like the brother is like swiping on Tinder and stuff, and he's like, how come he can look at Tinder or whatever, but I can't listen to music. And the mom's just like, but Tinder is a group activity, because he's like putting it up so they can all like vote to swipe left or right or whatever. And so they're propping him up on a pedestal and making him the golden child, while she's just being devalued constantly. And she's really into singing, and that's the other thing. Like, it's like in her high school, the music teacher, she like joins the choir, and the music teacher like notices she's obviously very talented and wants to train her to like get into college under a music degree or something. But because it's something that has to do with sound, the mom's just immediately like, oh, and if I was blind, would you get into painting then too, or something? It's just like very devaluing and very selfish and self-centered, and like that's basically the family dynamic, you know? Like, she takes all this shit but does all this stuff for them, and they still blame her for everything. But while that's going on, she's trying to get more into singing, and she really likes singing, and I guess it kind of becomes like Glee or whatever, one of those musical things. And the teacher puts her together with this boy who, like, then they start doing a duet, and but then he's like he does something mean, like, because the parents are very embarrassing to her in front of her friend. He kind of starts a rumor about them being embarrassing, pretty much. And she gets really mad at him, but then he makes up to her and they fall in love or whatever. I'll get into that in a minute, maybe. Because they like devaluing her time, her parents are, they basically keep undercutting what she's doing, so that every time she's trying to go to the teacher's house to practice and everything, or practice with her duet partner. Family's always planning or being like, oh, our needs are more important, come and work for us. And that she keeps doing that, but eventually she has to kind of put her foot down. And like, I feel like the whole movie kind of comes to a head when that happens. You know, it peaks at that point because she like finally confronts them and says all these things she's been saving up for, basically, of can't keep being your free interpreter. You're just such self-centered people and like all this stuff, you know, basically calling them out on all their fucking bullshit. I felt like everything up to that point I was kind of on board with, and that seems very good too. And like, it kind of put me completely on board this movie for a second. But right after that scene, the whole movie falls apart. And I think also, like, I feel like the tone changes, and like maybe you're like, well, of course it changes because things get better after that, you know. But that's like the Hollywood bullshit dream that they've been perpetuating on us since Hollywood started, pretty much, of just like all these incredibly toxic people, you know, being incredibly toxic to her like their entire lives, her entire life at least, and then because she calls them on their bullshit one time, then magically they're all transformed into like this really caring family and shit. Highly narcissistic people do not change, especially not for other people, especially not for the person they've been scapegoating their entire lives. Because anything they say or do will always be viewed as negative. So if she's calling them out on their bullshit, that's obviously her fault for not just being their perfect little pawn, daughter, whatever. I mean, she even says, like, the mom comes in and, like, says something to her at one point that's like, when you were born, I really hoped you were deaf because if you weren't deaf, then I would be a horrible mom, basically. And she actually says something back to her, is like, oh no, you're not a horrible mom because you're deaf. You're a horrible mom for so many other reasons. And they, like, laugh and stuff, but then she's like, the best mom ever after that, best mom ever. And that's when, like, movies like these kind of go off the deep end, I feel, and because they go into realms of fantasy. It's like you're trying to make this realistic coming-of-age story, but that's not that's the fantastical part, when, like, everything magically turns out all right for this young lady. We don't want to see bad things happen to her, you know, even though it's like the first half is like nothing but bad things happen to her, and then the second half, it's the opposite. In the second half, she's suddenly a Mary Sue, and like everything is magically better. And I see what they're going for, but at the same time, I feel like this is also one of those types of Oscar things where they just like latch on to one disability or whatever the current topic of interest seems to be, and write a movie around that, and like everything, you know, because it's the topical whatever thing of the time, then therefore it's a good movie and worthy of Best Picture. I don't know what the logic is behind it. All I know is it's bullshit, and I wish it would stop. Okay, let's weigh all the pluses and minuses, I guess. The acting was all really good, even though I didn't think the story was really worthy of how good the acting was, I guess. Especially the teacher. I really liked the teacher. He like had his own kind of personality and was really funny. A lot of the humor I felt throughout the movie came from him, because this was like marketed as a dramedy or something. And I feel like the parts with the teacher are pretty funny. And some of the scenes with the parents actually are pretty funny, especially in the early movie. The early movie was, or the first half of this film, I thought was actually pretty good, even though like I didn't stray out of the cookie cutter coming of age story that Hollywood uses to make these movies. But it was still fairly enjoyable up until, like I said, like everything peaks when she confronts her parents. Oh, and the thing with her falling in love with that boy too, I don't know. Just one of those things that, like, he does something toxic to her by spraying that rumor, then does something else that's toxic by not leaving her alone until she forgives him, and basically tricks her into falling in love with him. You know, that's because that's what toxic people do. Again, it's like perpetuating the wrong message, because like everyone needs a happy ending, everything needs to be magically better. It feels like one of those Disney Channel movies, actually, especially with like the music stuff. Now I'm thinking about it, you know, like just like by the end of the movie, that's what it turns into, where like the girl is really innocent and pure and nothing but good things happen to her. I think that's my full opinion of the movie now. I've come to realize that's all I have to say about this movie. Good acting, but everything else was kind of a minus. What would I rate this ultimately? The script wasn't anything special at all. It had some funny moments. The overall story and everything was just like so cliche. And I really hate the magically everything is better now bullshit at the end. In any movie that's kind of annoying, but it's especially annoying in this one. I'd probably give this a 3. Because like the production and stuff was pretty high. Everything else left a bad taste in my mouth. I'd maybe raise it half a point for the acting. That seems fair. 3.5 out of 10. Alright, please like and subscribe if you're interested in seeing more. Tune in tomorrow for more reviews. Or later today, maybe.